Clinging to power, Theresa May's election gamble backfires disastrously with a hung parliament. She vows to stay on as Prime Minister, hoping to do a deal with Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionists.
I obviously wanted a different result last night, and I'm sorry for all those colleagues who lost their seats, who didn't deserve to lose, and of course I'll reflect on what happened.
Jeremy Corbyn confounds expectations to increase the number of Labour MPs and claims he's the real winner.
The arguments the Conservative Party put forward in this election have lost. I think we need a change.
I'm live in Downing Street on another dramatic day of political developments. It's a bad night for the SNP, losing seats in Scotland, and UKIP losing another leader, as the voters' verdict is delivered in election 2017.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale in Downing Street.
Good evening from Downing Street, where a wounded Theresa May is still in power tonight, but only just. Her general election gamble failed badly, costing her party seats and its slim majority. The Tories are still the biggest party at Westminster, but must now rely on support from Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionists to form a government. There was a sombre victory speech here today, and later Mrs May said sorry to all the Tory candidates who'd lost their seats. She said she would reflect on her disastrous night. By contrast, a triumphant Jeremy Corbyn said Labour had been the real winners and led calls for Mrs May to resign. In the first of our reports, here's our political editor Robert Peston on the hung Parliament and the Prime Minister hanging on.
The second time she's returned from Buckingham Palace to begin the process of forming a government. The first time last July, she was triumphant as new leader of the Tory party, but today was after the worst night of her political life, having thrown away the Tory party's majority in Parliament in a general election she didn't have to hold.
I have just been to see Her Majesty the Queen, and I will now form a government.
But not a hint that she'd failed, not even a whisper of apology.
What the country needs more than ever is certainty. And having secured the largest number of votes and the greatest number of seats in the general election, it is clear that only the Conservative and Unionist Party has the legitimacy and ability to provide that certainty by commanding a majority in the House of Commons.
Now this was what one of her team told me was the very worst moment of his life, the moment polls closed on Thursday.
It's 10 o'clock and we can give you the result of the Joint Broadcasters exit poll, and it predicts only that the Conservatives are the largest party.
Thank you. Hi, how are you doing?
As for him, well, all his dreams have come true. Well, almost. Written off by pundits and most of his MPs as a no-hoper, he secured a big increase both in Labour's share of the vote and number of MPs.
The Prime Minister called the election because she wanted a mandate. Well, the mandate she's got is lost Conservative seats, lost votes, lost support and lost confidence. I would have thought that's enough to go, actually, and make way for a government that will be truly representative of all of the people of this country.
Now that's a Labour celebration in North London. And here in Canterbury, they took a seat they've never, ever held. There were modest gains for the Lib Dems, but their most famous face, the former Deputy Prime Minister, was evicted.
In politics, you live by the sword and you die by the sword.
As for UKIP, well, its leader, Paul Nuttall, resigned, having won 0 seats and, more importantly, seeing its vote share shrivel. A challenging night, too, for the Scottish National Party, as they lost 21 MPs, including its leader in Westminster, and the man, Alex Salmond, credited with turning the party into such a force. So for the Tories, Scotland was the exception to its night of misery. In England, though, there was pain all over, which included the ejection of the minister Ben Gummer, who wrote their much criticised election manifesto. Some friendly advice to Mrs May, well, not really, from the Lib Dems leader.
Theresa May promised strong and stable leadership. She has brought weakness and uncertainty. If she has an ounce of self-respect, she will resign.
And she didn't seek to flatter either.
They were so arrogant that they thought they could do anything and simply get away with it. And now they're planning to cobble together an unstable administration, causing yet more damaging uncertainty.
Now, his success broke all the rules of modern politics, promising to tax businesses and the rich £49 billion a year to invest in childcare, schools, hospitals and end to student fees. Young people in particular were won over.
We're offering to put forward the programme on which we fought the election. We have done no deals and no pacts with anybody. We're there as the Labour Party with our points of view. Everybody knows what they are, and everyone can see the huge increase in our support because of the way we conducted the election and the comprehensive nature of the programme we put forward.
So will Mrs May willingly move out of here to make way for him? That's a laugh. But the penny did eventually drop for her that apologising might be an idea.
I had wanted to achieve a larger majority, but that was not the result that we secured. And I'm sorry for all those candidates and hard-working party workers who weren't successful, but also particularly sorry for those colleagues who were MPs and ministers who'd contributed so much to our country and who lost their seats and didn't deserve to lose their seats. And as I reflect on the results, I will reflect on what we need to do in the future to take the party forward.
Lonely at the top? Well, for her, much worse. Tory MPs tonight only standing by her because they currently fear the possible alternatives would be worse.
OK, well, Robert is here. So we have a Prime Minister, we think, tonight. We don't have a cabinet yet, or at least not one we know about. What's it going to look like, do you think?
Well, here's the thing. If she'd won the kind of majority she was hoping for, and indeed expected, there would have been a major reshuffle, with the highest profile casualty being the Chancellor, Philip Hammond. Now, as a sign of how weakened she is, there will be no changes to the top jobs, and we'll get the announcement of that either later today or tomorrow. In fact, her main representative, the Chief Whip, is talking to MPs to find out what they need to continue to support her in office. So vulnerable is she? One MP said to me, fairly graphic terms, we all, she then used a rude word, hate her because of the damage that they feel she's done to the party. So she's really here on sufferance, and if there was an obvious candidate to replace her, she'd be out, but there isn't.
All right, Robert, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Well, with one result still to come, this is how the political picture is looking tonight. The Conservatives have 318 seats, excuse me, making them the biggest party, but short, crucially, of the 326 needed for an outright majority. They lost 12 seats overnight. Labour now has 261, that's a gain of 29 seats, most of them taken off Tory hands. The Liberal Democrats have 12 seats, an overall gain of 4, but not the resurgence that they had hoped for. UKIP's vote collapsed and they lost their only seat and, indeed, their leader. The SNP now have 35 seats, a fall of 21, with the Conservatives and Labour gaining most of them. And in Northern Ireland, it's almost a two-way split, with Sinn Féin on 7 seats and the Democratic Unionists on 10 seats. And it is those 10 DUP seats that are the real key to Theresa May clinging onto power. The Unionists have given her their support, which is enough for a working majority. What's not clear is what the price of power will be. From Belfast, Neil Connery reports.
Who runs the UK is now in their hands. Overnight, these 10 Democratic Unionist MPs and their leader, Arlene Foster, have become kingmakers at Westminster. Their votes crucial in giving Theresa May and the Conservatives a tiny majority.
The Prime Minister has spoken with me this morning, and we will enter discussions with the Conservatives to explore how it may be possible to bring stability to our nation at this time of great challenge. We may represent Northern Ireland constituencies in the House of Commons, but we are as seized of the interests of the United Kingdom as a whole as we are for Northern Ireland.
After last night, the Democratic Unionists now find themselves centre stage in British politics. So what could the DUP demand? They are for Brexit, but want a soft border with the Republic, with no special status for Northern Ireland, keeping it fully within the UK. A deal to tackle legacy issues from the Troubles, such as no historical prosecution of soldiers. They also want to keep the pension triple lock and reduce corporation tax to help boost jobs. So the Democratic Unionist Party now hold the balance of power at Westminster, but at what price? Neil Connery, ITV News, Belfast.
So the Conservatives' hopes of increasing their majority at the expense of Labour failed spectacularly in England. Large numbers of young people got their revenge, and pro-Brexit voters rejected more austerity. In a moment, Geraint Vincent reports on how students helped Labour win Canterbury for the first time in 100 years. But first, Paul Brand reports from Stockton South, where a big Tory majority was wiped out.
I just think it's time that we had caring politicians.
As the arguments went round in Stockton, this cycling club, like this constituency, spun back to Labour. All the talk here only talked them out of voting Tory.
I just like Jeremy Corbyn. I like his honesty, and I think he gets through to the youth of the country, which is the future of our country, so that's why I voted for him.
Did Jeremy Corbyn surprise you in this campaign?
Yes. Greatly so, yeah. Greatly so. I did feel for a long time that lovely man, probably, and did believe in what he was saying, but not very strong as a leader.
But he won you over?
Totally. I think this campaign's been good for him. He's been brilliant.
Voters don't say the same here about Theresa May, who thought she could weld together a majority out of Brexit seats like this one.
I think she let herself down. She launched it as the Brexit election to get people behind it to get a bigger mandate. As soon as all these other elements came in, it muddied the waters, and that's what let them down.
In a working class town, low pay, austerity drove many back to Labour, while others simply sat it out.
Did any of you vote in the election?
No.
And how would you normally vote?
Labour.
All of you Labour?
Yeah. The Conservatives are for the rich, aren't they? And they're not really for the poor.
And she didn't convince you this time that had changed?
Not one tiny bit, no. Now they did Jeremy Corbyn.
But just enough voters here did cross back over to Labour, preferring the offer on the other side.
Cast in stone, statues and spires, Canterbury was a cathedral to conservatism, but it has been brought down from within. On the city's university campuses yesterday, they queued up to vote to overturn the old order and deliver the seat to Labour.
The cost of living, tuition fees, I think it just boils down to the fact that people feel that the Tory government haven't worked to help the students, they haven't worked to help the vulnerable, and they haven't tried to help at all.
Students make up a big chunk of the electorate in Canterbury, and they have made themselves heard, overturning another old adage that the young are uninterested in politics, more concerned with selfies than society.
Students have finally realised that they do have a voice, and you say we're on Facebook, on Snapchat, but we're spreading messages through that. It's a form of interaction that allows us to become more knowledgeable. So to say we're always on Facebook, what of it? It means we're getting smart.
I think the youth vote this time around has been really important. I think we can see for the statistics coming through that it's definitely made a difference this time. And obviously with Brexit last time, and there was the whole story of the old people ruining the young people vote. This time it isn't that storyline, and that's fantastic.
2017, the revenge of the young, perhaps. But if the voice of youth keeps delivering results like it did here, all the political parties will start listening very closely. Geraint Vincent, ITV News, Canterbury.
Still to come on the evening news, more reaction to the result of the general election. Do stay with us after this short break. And welcome back to Downing Street. Now, last night, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn came closer to taking power here than many had thought possible. His party may not have won the most seats, But Mr Corbyn's smile today showed that he was the real victor. And as Rachel Younger reports, in contrast to Mrs May, it's his leadership that now looks secure.
Look at that smile. He knows he's turned politics upside down. Jeremy Corbyn leaving home having surpassed expectations and driven a campaign that in just 7 weeks changed everything. The most unexpected result in decades, possibly making his daily stop for the papers a little more pleasurable than usual. Yes, while the beleaguered Prime Minister headed for Buckingham Palace, the man she thought she could trounce hung out with the voters who, as it turned out, wanted someone to listen, not lecture them. And so it's Jeremy Corbyn, the man whose future many people thought could be in doubt today, who's most secure in his job, relaxed enough, in fact, to be enjoying brunch with his wife at this cafe here in Islington. Everyone wanted a moment by his side, including some of his own MPs who not so long ago were deserting him in their droves.
I and everybody else underestimated Jeremy Corbyn and his ability to win seats, and he has proved us all wrong, and I'm really glad that he has.
And so were the neighbours. Who knows how long the elation will last? There's really been more unpredictable times in politics, but right now the man who lost looks anything but a loser.
Thanks a lot.
Rachel Younger, ITV News, Islington.
Well, the other big story of the night was in Scotland, where the SNP suffered big losses. Nicola Sturgeon accepted that her push for a second independence referendum was to blame. Our correspondent Martin Geisler is in Edinburgh for us tonight. And Martin, a bruising night then for the SNP.
Yeah, that's for sure, Mary. I mean, let's be clear about this. The SNP are still the biggest party in Scotland by a country mile. They still have more MPs than all their rivals combined. But this was a bad night for them, that's for sure. They've lost a third of their MPs, and big names too. Angus Robertson, Alex Salmond, gone, and that's going to hurt them. They were so bullish going into this campaign. They wanted another independence referendum, and they wanted it soon. That is all being recalibrated tonight. The electorate in Scotland sent a very clear message to Nicola Sturgeon, and she has heard it. She said today there's no doubt independence had a part to play in this result, and she's going to contemplate that over the next couple of days. It was an extraordinary night here in Scotland, as it was everywhere, but consider this one twist. When you look at the figures, it's very easy to argue that it was Scotland, yes, Scotland, that has kept a Conservative Prime Minister in Downing Street. Who'd have thought it?
Martin Geisler, thank you. Well, Europe's chief Brexit coordinator described the election result as yet another own goal and said it would make talks even more difficult. While Europe editor James Mates is in Brussels tonight. So, James, how will this affect negotiations then?
You know, as Mary's dawn broke this morning here, they were looking at the chaos in London and offering the British a delay on the start of these Article 50 talks, which is meant to happen a week on Monday. Well, as the days developed, of course, it's clear now there will be a British government. It will be David Davis they're still talking about, but what they now don't know is what Britain's position is going to be. They thought they knew that we wanted out of the single market, out of the customs union, out from any control by the European Court of Justice. Now they hear Ruth Davidson, a big figure in the Tory party after the triumph in Scotland, talking about wanting an open Brexit. The question I've been asked most here in Brussels is, what is the DUP's policy on Brexit? Is there still a majority for a hard Brexit in the House of Commons? And absolutely crucially, is Theresa May going to be strong enough to sell some of the difficult compromises that lie ahead? They see that she doesn't feel strong enough to remove or reshuffle any of her senior cabinet ministers, despite having signalled that she wanted to. What's going to happen when she has to sell some of those difficult compromises? And all this time, of course, the clock is ticking.
James Mates in Brussels, thank you. Robert Peston joins me now for a final thought. Extraordinary 24 hours. Who'd have expected it? How's it going to end?
Well, you could probably hear there's a Tories Out demo at the end of Downing Street, and that's appropriate because what the election exposed was sharp divisions within Britain, particularly between the young, who turned out in droves to vote for Labour, and older people who massively backed Mrs May. Also, we are seeing a sharper division between the two main parties than we've seen for decades. Labour, its most left-wing, actually, frankly, since any of us can actually remember. This is a remaking of our political structure. It's two parties again absolutely dominating. Who'll come out on top? Well, we may know sooner than most of us might like, having already had a number of votes recently, because very few people think that Mrs May can survive in office with such a wafer-thin majority for long. We may well be going back to another general election even as soon as the autumn.
In Downing Street, thank you very much indeed. And that is all from us for now. Julie Etchingham will be back with news at 10 with all the latest developments during the day. But from me and all the team here and back in our studio, have a very good evening. Bye-bye.